What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Couple Things
with Shawn and Andrew,
a podcast all about couples
and the things they go through.
Today, we're going to talk about dad.
That's right, my dad.
Yes.
And if you don't know, my father passed away just a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
Suddenly, out of nowhere, unexpectedly. And since couples, one of the things they go through is death and grief, I figured it would maybe be helpful for us to talk through this. And as I was going through this whole process the last couple of weeks, journaled through it just because, I don't know, this is like a once in a lifetime thing, quite literally. And I wanted to have this process captured just so I could refer back to it in honor and in memory of my dad. But now we have scripted 5 pages of kind of organized thoughts. And if it is jumbled up, forgive us, but we're going to try our best to share how the grief process has been for me, how it's been for you. And let me just make something clear here. I don't want this episode to necessarily be about me or my dad. I am wanting to create this episode that's about grief specifically, because we all grieve about different things in life, whether it's a lost loved one, a lost relationship, a lost career, lost plans, hopes, and dreams, whatever it may be. And so I have been documenting this process, just journaling, because that's what I naturally do in all phases of life. And hopefully by me sharing my experience with grief, my personal story with grief, you may be able to navigate your journey through grief maybe a little bit better. Maybe you'll have vocabulary or timelines or thoughts vocalized that you otherwise wouldn't. And so that's my hope. And really our hope with all the content we make is to start conversations, meaningful conversations that are about the most meaningful thing in life, and that's about family. So I really found like hearing from other people was so helpful and encouraging in a lot of ways. So I hope that's the result of this episode for you as well.
To start, we'll tell you what happened to Dad. So on the night of December 26th, going into 27th, Dad had what was called a fatal arrhythmia or ventricular fibrillation, where his heart got out of sync or out of rhythm and was not able to get back. Because of that, he basically passed away in his sleep. We all found out in the middle of the night, and I'm actually curious because the way it had happened that Andrew and I both found out was we were sleeping in separate rooms that night because the kids were having a hard time and I was really sick. So Andrew was letting me kind of rest and try to heal, and he was taking care of the kids. You found out around midnight, 1 a.m., and then didn't wake me up to tell me until around 6. And I'm curious what your first few hours of realization were like.
So, okay. Can I just read what I wrote? Because literally I said 1:45, I got a text from my mom saying that Dad had a heart attack. And I got a call from my brother about 45 minutes later saying Dad had died. I just laid there and cried, thinking of what I last said to my dad, how I last treated him. I was thinking of my mom and thinking of how much of a blessing it is that we all had the last week of Christmas together. And then I said, I know that God is good, and I can't tell if this is a bad nightmare or not. To think of my dad just lying there lifeless, so out of the ordinary for him, and it's like scary. It's so unnatural, right? About a half hour later, I said the full emotions are setting in, and I'm crying just looking at the photos and videos of him. I'm mostly sad just thinking of our kids and them not getting to know him better. The wonderful life that we get to live is in large part due to his legacy and what he built for us, and I wish that they could get to know the man who laid this foundation. I'm so glad that I wrote a letter to him a few months ago, which I'll talk about. Half hour later, I was still crying, thinking about my mom. They had been together since high school. They're high school sweethearts. And I said, I'm not sure how she will navigate life without him. Starting to think about all the things that need to be done, the unfinished houses that he was building. He was a contractor that built houses. what to do with all the different things that he was involved with. But then I started thinking about how one of our last conversations that we had, my dad and I, was about legacy. And it was about family mission and the values that we had. And I feel like the spiritual wealth that he gave us as siblings is greater than any blessing that I could have ever asked for, right? I feel like subconsciously I was expecting to keep him around for another 20 or 30 years because that's how long my grandparents lived. And my dad died at 63. I guess I had benchmarked, like my grandpa that died the youngest was 78. So I was like, oh, he'll be around for another 15 years. I got this. But then we told Drew a couple hours after that, we said the Papa's with Jesus. And she says, why can't I go up there? And you told her that Papa's in her heart with Jesus. And we could talk about, we had a big day with the kids. There's 8 grandkids. And we had a big kind of day with them talking about emotions and trying to figure out how to navigate that. But first, let me say that I miss my dad. I wouldn't miss the opportunity to spend another day with him or be annoyed by him or sit and listen to one of his wild lectures or get another hug from him. But the one word that I feel in my soul is grateful. And the reason that I feel that way is because the last couple months with him were like really beautiful. It was, he was hosting events. He hosted a concert with all his dearest friends. He hosted like an event with some of his high school and fraternity brothers. He hosted an event with some of his college football teammates. The night that he died, he did the newlywed game with my mom at my best friend's wedding shower. And he we had the week of Christmas. We had these conversations. I wrote him a letter that was stemmed from a book called The Intentional Father. And it was about all the things that I feel like he got right as a dad that I was thankful for and how that's affected me as a father, has positively affected me as a dad. And so like, those are all things that had we known he was going to die, we would have done, but they just kind of coincidentally happened to be the last few months that we didn't know were going to happen. So I don't feel like I do think we're grieving. I think we're in the grieving process, but I'm not like boo-hoo sad, right? Like it's more of, I think I'm a little melancholy, just being humbled by the fragility of life and like struck by a new perspective. My dad and I had a great perspective or great relationship, and I'm so thankful for that. Not everyone can say that. I feel like I was his student. I feel like I benefited so much from the things that he sacrificed for us. And so all those things lead me to just be grateful. And really from a high level, the 2 takeaways from the last couple of weeks for me are, one, that I was extremely blessed to have a dad who loved and cared for me as my dad did. And 2, that God is good. And I've felt that. I've seen that. It's been really amazing over the past couple of weeks to experience that. And I think the first of having been blessed by such a great father reinforces the second, that God is good. So that's the main takeaway. And that's what I've been trying to communicate is that, like, you know what? It's been difficult. It's been sad, but it's been beautiful, and God is good. What's wild is that in the past couple of weeks, there's been the full spectrum of life phases. I feel like I had a dear friend get married, and I stood up next to him as he was saying his vows. We have another niece and nephew coming here in the next couple months, and we all were together celebrating. And so we got a lot of life experience here, including the death of my dad. And it's just a reminder that, like, the circle of life, the phases of life, like, they do come and go. But whatever it may look like, I've just been really struck by how joy and pain go hand in hand, and it's beautiful, and it seems like a paradox, and I think that it is like a beautiful mystery, but like the the deepest sorrow, I feel like, can result in the most long-lasting joy. And they're just right there with each other. It's just, can you find the joy? Are you willing to look for the joy and put in the effort or change your perspective in order to do that? And so that's been my challenge for myself, is through this process to continue to look for the joy, even though it is painful and sorrowful. I've been researching grief though, because I don't know what I'm in for here. I've never lost a close loved one like this. Lost grandparents, but that was from old age. And Lexi and I were talking, in Fiji, they have 100 days of grief is what they go through. Do you know this?
Where?
Fiji. Is that right? And so they'll have services, memorial services on the 3rd, 7th, 49th, and 100th day. They have 4 memorial services, which is pretty cool, right? And they gather around and pray and bestow presents. In the U.S., we don't really do that. I guess I'm saying this because to set your expectations that we're 17 days into this, and I don't know what is around the corner. I feel like the initial shock of the grief hit me, and we cried that first 24 hours. Like, I'd never cried like that. I had a headache. My eyes stung. We were all dehydrated. It was like beautiful. Wouldn't change it, but I'd never cried that much. But now it's almost like this, the long form of grief is here, where random things, objects or food or statements or like a home building site will like trigger a memory of my dad. And that's what I'm like a little more nervous about, because I don't know what that's going to be for me. And it could just hit you out of nowhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know that the initial period after death is difficult. I don't know how difficult post-funeral days will be. But I'll tell you, they say there's 7 phases of grief. If I'm kind of just spitballing here. This is kind of for me to get off my chest, if you don't mind. They say there's 7 phases of grief. Shock and denial is the first. Second is pain and guilt. Third is anger and bargaining. Fourth is depression. Fifth is the upward turn. Sixth is reconstruction and working through. And the seventh is acceptance and hope. Shock and denial, I feel like we felt.
Yeah.
This was out of no. I mean, he had a doctor's appointment the week before, and they said he was healthy as a horse.
Well, even the coroner said he was healthy.
Yeah. So that was shocking for sure. Pain and guilt. Honestly, I don't feel like there's a lot of guilt on my end. We were the only siblings not in Indianapolis. We came back to Nashville to celebrate Christmas as just our family with our 2 kids. So we weren't necessarily there, but I can't say I feel guilty about that. Like,
well, and I mean, I can understand how that pain and guilt would set in, but there wasn't anything that could be done, and nobody was able to see Dad, at the hospital with his final breath. It was quick. And
yeah, I also don't personally feel like there was any bargaining for me, like reckoning with God. Like, oh, if you bring him back, I'll do that. Like, I don't really, I'm at peace with it. I really am. If there's any anger I feel, it's like the week before the funeral and after my dad died, it was everyone hyping up my dad. It's like, oh, your dad's great. He affected my life in this. And it's like all the focus and attention is on that loved one. And then the funeral happens, and the next day it's back to normal, back in the routine. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, hey, for me, simultaneously, like, everything has changed, but nothing has changed. Like my dad was an integral part of my life on a foundational level, but like he's not around here every day. He's not. So everything has changed for me personally, but nothing on the outside. It's not like I lost an arm or something like that. It's like, it's a hidden wound. And I was a little angry that like people weren't continuing to hype up my dad and like compliment him.
Well, and I think that was something we all talked about as a family. We stayed in Indianapolis as like a full extended family for 10 days before anybody decided to start flying back home. And I remember texting my sister-in-law, and she said, I feel angry, and it feels weird. And I remember talking to Mom and her saying it feels weird because it's like when we were at home for those 10 days, we lived in a bubble where we could grieve and mourn and go through the ups and downs and the happiness and the sadness, and people still were showing up to the door with food. So that still felt like people were acknowledging what had happened. But when we started flying home and we like broke out of that bubble, it was weird to see like the world had never stopped. And it made all of us feel angry. Because coming home and having people not understand, or people be like, oh, did you have so much fun over New Year's? It was like, well, no.
Right.
You know?
Like, people definitely understood, like, the day of the funeral, people were like, oh, yeah, don't respond to text message or calls. But then now it's, people have less of an understanding of that, where still this is my 20th day on planet Earth without a father. If it's a little disorienting, like, legitimately. I'm not trying to be dramatic. It's just like, I can't call my dad up and ask him whatever random question. Right? So that's a new experience. But I don't know where I am on the 7 phases. I imagine, like, I'm humbly accepting that, I don't know, maybe I'm at phase 5.
I don't think that's a
no
progressive list. I think you can be anywhere on that list for the rest of your life. And I don't think you accomplish getting over one. You know, I think you can bounce back and forth.
Yeah, I'm not
forever.
sure. I legitimately don't know about this.
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's like you get over the shock and denial. I think 10 years from now, you could wake up one day and be completely in shock and denial. And I don't think you have to try to master that list and say, oh, I've succeeded at all of them.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know. There's just been some weird things. Like, I am not a dreamer. I don't ever remember my dreams. Maybe once a year. And on Sunday morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. bawling, crying, because I had a dream about my dad, that he was in our guest bedroom, like right across the way from where I was sleeping. And he came out and waved at me and like welcomed me in. And I was like, dang, it feels like I'm just now waking up from the past 2 weeks being a bad dream, you know? So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like. It's like a psychological curveball where I've never been through it, you know? I honestly feel, I feel really content with the whole thing. And like, I helped write the obituary, did like a eulogy, and all that was so cathartic for me to sit back and kind of cement how I will remember my dad. Go back through all his like LinkedIn posts, his Facebook posts, and it was like so great. It's like, man, this guy was a good man. But I don't know what what do I do with this, you know? We're talking about grief at a high level, like how do you navigate it, the 7 phases and stuff. I don't know if there's like a right way to do it, but I do think the one common thread of however you go through the process is to be present in it, which I'm really happy with that week before the funeral. I mean, we were all together. That was the focus, right? I feel like we did a great job of being together.
We did. And Dad was wild as always and videoed everything, even though he was right there.
The week before the funeral, I'm sorry, of like having that, being present in that grief, right?
Yeah. That week was very, very, very beautiful and very difficult and awesome. We spent every waking second together, our whole family, which was amazing. And there was no shortage of friends, family, just people in the community stopping by, dropping off diapers and food and cleaning the house and organizing things, and just we felt so taken care of by the community, which was incredible. And we were able to truly just be present with each other.
Yeah. It was really great. By the way, if I'm crying, it's like it's tears of joy and gratitude. I feel that in my soul. I'm sad, but I'm also grateful. Anyway.
If you don't mind.
What?
I just want to say too, like, I said this to that week we were in Indy, but Dad was the most amazing person ever. And I feel like society puts this weird spin on like, oh, my father-in-law or my mother. No, he was everything you could ever dream of in a human being, not just a father-in-law. And so, yes, with the shock and denial and everything of his passing, it's hard for there to be that anger because he was such a light that he wouldn't want you to be angry.
Yeah. Well, you talk on the note of the week after he died, before the funeral, all the siblings, there's like a million things to do. We drove up from Nashville, got there at 12:30, hugged my mom and cried for like a half hour, but then it was straight into logistics. Mm-hmm. And it was like, where's the funeral going to be? When's it going to be? Who's going to talk? What are the Bible verses you're going to talk? What's he going to wear? Like, it's all this weird stuff. And I was like, hold on. Can we just be here together and not, you're getting calls from freaking a lot of people. And it's like, this does not matter. I want to be with my mom. I want to be with my siblings, and I want to be with our family. But you also, we brought the kids. We had 8 kids running around. Yeah. And the in-laws necessarily, they couldn't be as present as us. First of all, thank you for taking that like burden and kind of taking one for the team. But how was it for you? Because we've talked about how I've been able to be rather present with the grief, and you less so.
Yeah. That week was same as you said, really, really difficult, really beautiful, everything. But all of the spouses, the role we kind of took on was just trying to take all of the load off of you guys. So all of the load off of the siblings and mom. And in doing that, that was taking care of the kids, helping like direct and manage the phone calls from the funeral home and the directors and all the friends coming in. People would knock on the door every 20 minutes, which was such a beautiful thing, but that's a heavy load on you guys as well. So we were trying to direct them and set up systems for meal trains and just like truly be the brunt of it all, or like take the brunt of it. I will never forget, this is like a core memory though, Mom's sister. There was one day where I took 6 of the kids to the park and met up with my sister-in-law who had the other 2. And we just wanted to get them out of the house. It was very heavy in the house with just sadness, and we needed to get the kids out to like give them some fresh air and a new perspective and everything. And so I took them to the park, and Mom's sister showed up to help. And I remember after being there for a couple hours, I was like loading the kids back up, and she came over and she like stopped me, and she's like, I need you to look at me, like look in my eyes, in my soul, and like look at me. She's like, I need you to take a breath and tell me what you need. And I was like, I don't need anything. I just need the kids to be happy. I need to like take care of my husband. She's like, no, you have to grieve too. And my sister-in-law walked up, and we all just started bawling. And she was like, this is just as much like a loss for you as it is for everyone. And it just like hits you as a spouse because you're a supporting partner. So you try to you push it away for a second, and you're like, okay, what do I need to do for my husband? But it was really, I think that's one of the hard things about being the spouse on this side of this grief, was trying to grieve as well, because there isn't a lot of time for it at the beginning.
I feel like you did a great job of being honest. We had really good conversation through that,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't always, we don't always communicate well.
But
I
we
feel
did
like-
that week, which helped.
Honestly, the past couple weeks, I feel like this has changed the way we communicate.
Yeah. I remember one thing I felt was important that I did as a spouse was there was one night where it was just us. The kids had gone to sleep. And I kept asking him for like windows of like, tell me when you're in a good mindset that we can sit down and have a conversation. Not like serious, but just like when you and I can talk. And I kind of vetted those windows and I found an opportunity where I was like, he seems like you seemed like you were in a good place. And I was like, okay, I'm going to prod and I'm going to ask questions. Are you okay with that? You know, still trying to make sure you were in a good spot. But I said, let's run through it. As your wife, I need to know where you are. Do you feel guilty? Do you feel pain? Do you feel anger? And we just went one by one. And I said, do you feel happy? Do you feel sad? Do you feel, and I just went through all of these things. Do you feel you wish you were here? Do you feel, and it was a really good conversation that we had of just understanding where you were at that time and how I could best support you. And we did that many times throughout the time in Indy, and we still do that now. I said that yesterday. I was like, I need you to constantly tell me where you are so I can be the best support for you.
You've been very gentle. I appreciate it. Can I read some quotes on grief?
Please.
Andrew Garfield had like a viral clip that said the grief for his mom that he lost is unexpressed love, which you should watch that video of him talking about his mom with Stephen Colbert. I think that's great. Personally, I'm not sure I feel that way. Like the grief that I feel, I don't think is like love that I hadn't given my dad. It really is more of like this appreciation for him, and I feel humbled by it, where we make all these plans and it's like freaking whatever it is. Like we think we have a 5-10 year plan. We're about to talk about it on Thursday, what our 10-year plan is. And the grief is that's gone now. I guess, go ahead.
I feel like one of the greatest gifts Dad ever gave all of us was in an event like this. We understood so completely that he loved us, we loved him, and he loved God. And it was like, okay, as tragic and as sad as this is, the best gift he ever gave us was, I mean, one of the first things you and I laughed about in the first moments of finding out about Dad was he was the biggest fan of Jesus. And if only we all could have seen that meeting, that he didn't want to meet anyone in the world more than him. I mean, it would just...
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Here's another quote. Grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It's an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. It's the price you pay for love. The only cure for grief is to grieve. Mm-hmm. Which again, watching some of the people in our close life like try to distract themselves away from the sadness on social media or whatever, I just feel like you are missing. This process has been beautiful. Mm-hmm. I've been saying that to everyone. It's been like a wild few weeks and I feel like I'm in over my head, but also it's been so beautiful. And I was thinking about how it's almost like a level or phase in life that you can only unlock with the passing of a loved one. It's like all these stories that we've heard about my dad, the people who have come into our lives, the new memories that we've made off the memories that he already made. It's so cool to think about. And I wouldn't want to miss that there's like, a tinge of sadness to it, but I wouldn't want to miss it for the world. And I've been thinking about how, I looked this up. There's new research that suggests that anticipating the end of a good experience is an effective way to enjoy it more, or like experiencing the end of a good experience is a way to enjoy it more. Endings help us stay in the present, can bring us closer together with people in your life, can help us let go of the past and refocus on important things in your life, and can also provoke mixed emotions that create more meaning. And I feel like making the analogy of watching a sunrise or a sunset, or watching your children grow up. It's like the end of the diaper phase or the end of the baby. Like there's so many ends of phases, and there's beauty to be had in that. Like if the sky was always a sunset, you wouldn't appreciate it as much. Or if my dad was always around, I wouldn't appreciate him as much. But now I am overflowing with gratitude that like you don't experience it elsewise. And I want to sit here and tell you listening to like, hey, drastically change your life and make sure you don't take a single moment for granted and call your dad every day and go live whatever. Like some things aren't realistic though in the normal cadence of life. Like you're not going to go back and see your parents every day if you're grown and have moved for a spouse or a career. Like it's kind of unrealistic to think you can have this intensity of gratitude without something like this happening, you know?
I thought one of the most beautiful things to come of those 10 days together was I've never felt closer to our extended family.
Right.
Aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews. I will never, again, another core memory was one morning a random text was sent out by a cousin. They're like, going for a hike, taking the kids, who wants to join? And nobody responded. But I think 36 people showed up.
Yeah.
It was wild.
For the hike.
And just
Awesome.
seeing like how close everybody became and how much we text now and check in on one another. It's been really special.
Yeah, this is the most cliche thing. I didn't have this written about. Like, the end really can be the beginning of a lot of new things.
I felt like our family has drastically changed. And we were already one of the strongest families out there. But I've never seen our family look like this. And it's so special.
Yeah. I wanted to read some more of the journal, if you don't mind me saying, going through it chronologically. So that afternoon I said, it's feeling like an out-of-body experience where my emotions and realizations that he won't be here again haven't caught up with like my normal social interactions. It's like you have all these people, the cousins, and you're like interacting with them live, like nothing's changed, but it is kind of clouded with grief. But I said, right now it just feels like my dad is gone. He's in a different room or checking on a job site, and he'll be back soon. It's like, oh, we're just having this social hour and my dad is gone. He'll be back soon. What does it mean to not have him around as a resource in everyday life? Not hearing his random lectures or snoring or heavy scraping footsteps. It's a quiet void without him in his normal ambiance. Being in this house that he poured his heart into to build is like being in an empty stadium or theater. And then I talked about how I was crying so much again. That first 24 hours.
Yeah. I drove us down to Indy. You sat in the back with the kids. And I don't condone this, but I think I cried for the full 6-hour drive.
Yeah, dude, you stuffed that door with tissues, dude. I didn't see that. It was flooded it with tissues. Yeah. And then it wasn't until that night that I talked to my mom about what had happened and like her experience with it, because she went to bed with him. And I said, thinking of her doing CPR on him alone in bed makes me cry like a little child. She shared my sentiment that she thought the paramedics would come and he would go to the hospital and all would be okay. He would be healthy and they would revive him and it would just be back to normal. Which is kind of how he always lived. Like, that dude should have died 8 times before. But it always turned out to be okay. And
He got struck by lightning.
Twice.
Like, direct hit. I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah, I was a legend. Well, maybe, I don't know. We have the footage from the funeral. Maybe we'll share it. But there's a lot of good stories in there. Which is also, I feel like you have done really well in allowing me to laugh, too. Because it's not all sad, right? Like, there's plenty of jokes to make about my dad. Boy was not perfect. Anyway, I said, I'm glad that my mom was with my dad all the way to the end, though. My dad got to go to sleep with his bride and wake up with Christ. Mm-hmm. And then that night, it was the first time I took their dog out to go to the bathroom and do like the normal thing my dad would usually do. But it kind of hit me that it was the first of what I'm sure is many things that dad used to do that will now need to be picked up by one of us, which is a daunting thing too. It's like that guy did a lot, and now we have to kind of pick up some of the shards, right?
It's daunting, but I think if you take a step back and try to like objectively look at what all happened in those first 10 days, I think Dad touched each of us so much that people took on roles so naturally that it was really cool to see.
Yeah. The other thing we did was we took 2 days to kind of just be with each other, but then pretty soon we started working back into doing some of the things that we were used to doing. Like my brother and I would get some exercise. We had like the big family dinner that we always do on Friday night. And I feel like assembling some sort of routine helped us push through like the emotional mud. So that was helpful. I don't know if we overdid it with that or not.
I don't think so. We had a lot of visitors, so I think it gave us room to breathe. I think if you choose only the sadness side of it, you're failing to celebrate the goodness of your person.
Yeah, which I think is important to do. Celebrate.
Absolutely.
And so on that note, other things that have helped me are, one, I alluded to this, but like being a part of writing the obituary and being a part of the eulogy was really, really, really cathartic for me. And it was like a 4 or 5 hour time period where I had no distraction and I was solely focused on my dad and who he was to me. And writing that out was like, oh man, I cried the whole time, but it was so just special to think about my dad and the role that he played in my life. So that was one thing. Second, my dad was a big piano player. He loved it. He played it every night when we were at home, would put us to bed by playing piano. And so I have been re-energized by the power of music, and I've put together like a 40-song playlist of songs that have reminded me of my dad because they're piano songs or just the lyrics have struck me in a certain way. So that's been really good as well. Also, typically I'm kind of a loner and I like to isolate myself. And so, we had a lot of people coming by on a daily basis before the funeral. And in that situation, I usually would kind of just escape to a room on a normal day. But I really was challenging myself to like be there with the people, hear their stories. And in doing so, I learned a lot of new things about my dad. It's a cliche analogy, but I think of, the phoenix in Harry Potter or elsewhere, but out of the ashes comes this new beauty. And that's really how I felt, where it's like there was life from this death. Like I would not have gotten to know my dad otherwise had he not died. I got to know him in really new and special ways. And I think that analogy of like, life from ashes is really powerful. So writing the obituary eulogy, the music playlist, being present. And then the other thing that helped me through was kind of like, assembling some sort of routine. Also having just those tender and intimate conversations with Shawn was another special fruit of this, where I think we got to know each other in really new and special ways too. She's never really seen this crumbled part of me, just sad. And I was not incapacitated, but it was definitely like a burden those first couple of days. So talking it out with a loved one, your partner, whatever it is. I think moving did help me. My brother and I kind of made it a focus to exercise for a little bit, a couple times a week. And I think that just provided an outlet, if you will, and made me feel physically better, even though my emotions were still kind of bummed out. And then I got outside for sure. I also read through his text messages. I looked at pictures and videos for hours. I listened to his voicemails. We pulled out old pictures and went through them with my mom, and just kind of reflecting on those moments, I think sparked a lot of memories and a lot of joy with it. And also we ate a ton of food. I'm a bit of an emotional eater, so we definitely crushed some food, and we had so many people that were kind and generous enough to provide that for us, which was really special. Those were all things that helped me. But I'd be curious how if you've gone through something like this, what are the things that you've tangibly and practically done that have helped you through the grief process? I've been noodling on this concept about how noodling, like you could feel deep emotions and not be volatile with your emotions. Like there's a difference between just being an absolute wreck with your emotions and not being able to function at all. That being one side of the spectrum, and the other just trying to like block out any emotions that you have. I feel like there's a middle ground where you can truly feel the depth of the thing, yes, but not let it.
But you can argue that grief comes and looks differently in everyone. So a lot of people don't have that ability to have such self-awareness to level out their deepest emotions in such a hard time.
Yeah.
So I think that expectation could come later on, but at the beginning, you don't know how it's going to present itself.
Yeah. I'm proud of how my siblings handled it, though. Mm-hmm. It was all very much like love-oriented. Some people get stressed. Some people get angry with mm-hmm. grief. Some people just shut down. But I feel like it was a unifying thing for us to go through together. But I don't know. I mean, I'm fully open to the idea that grief will be coming in waves, and some of those waves may hit harder than others. I also heard from a friend that the grief process, like it's not, you make it through step one, you're on step two, and you never go back to step one. It's like you kind of revisit the anger or the sorrow or the bargaining or whatever it is. Like it's not a linear process, as Shawn was talking about. So to me, it's wild to think that I feel this sad having lost my parent. I was talking to a dear friend yesterday who lost a mom about 18 months ago, and she's like, yeah, it doesn't get any better, but you distract yourself away from it to a certain extent. And the thought struck me like, my gosh, everyone loses parents at some point. Is everyone just kind of perpetually sad in this sense? Like, I am super curious to know how people make it through this and just like continue, chugging along. Like the thought had never struck me, the grief that people carry with them. It also got me excited about humans in general, because despite that grief, they keep on keeping on. And I think that takes courage and hope. And then right now, this is my latest journal entry. I feel like I said emotionally I feel okay, but there's a degree of anxiety from getting caught up, like responding to the hundreds of people that sent texts, so many of the wonderful people that do this with us day to day send us DMs and messages. And it's like, first of all, that insight was so helpful and is so special to like hear their stories, and thank you for that. But trying to respond to that, call the people back, and then also trying to maintain the new perspective of what I feel like I learned, which was like my dad did work. He was a hard worker, but he also always put the family first. And it's like, I can't say I always did that. And I'm trying to work towards that. Anyway, I feel like there's a mountain of work and projects. And I don't actually know if there was more to do or there is more to do than normal, but I feel like there is. So there is this unsettling feeling about that. Anyway, can I read some? Well, I also wanted to read some insight from others, if that's okay. You up for me reading through these? Yeah. So this is from a buddy, Justin Zeller. He said, my dad's name was Guy. He said, Guy did a beautiful job of balancing earth and eternity. He lived life to the fullest, but always had his mind on things above. He accomplished a lot in 63 years, but perhaps his greatest accomplishment is the legacy he's leaving. His legacy reminds us to live hard and to live fully. Don't get cheated out of what life can offer. And it also reminds us that the easiest path to living in that way is understanding one simple truth. The life is temporary, but Christ's work on the cross is permanent. My buddy Joseph Shields says that Guy was a great man that had an even greater Savior. I like that. And then our buddy Hunter Smith wrote this. He said, Guy had a child's faith, a warrior's spirit, and an engineer's brain. He was zany, peculiar, lovable, strong, and whenever I was with him, I felt I was with someone whose very presence was shrouded with wonder and possibility. Above all these, Guy was a man of faith and love. He said, but no one gets out of here alive. And in our ever-accelerating pursuit of safety and longevity, which he really believes is a subconscious desire for eternal life, may we remember that Earth is not a safe place. It's not a good place to be human, but being humans means being physically temporary. People have been dying here for a very long time, and you and I, regardless of our advances in science or medicine, will not be able to shed this reality. We have no choice in the matter. Our only choice is how we live in light of it. Will our response be anxiety and worry or passion and faith? Our friend Linda Zanacco, I feel like, had some really good insight into the grief that was to come. She said that she lost her mom a while ago, but that her voice, the voice that she hears from her mom will only keep getting louder. Like the subconscious messages that they always used to say, and you heard them saying growing up, will only get louder. She said you'll walk into a room and think about what they said about it, and it only becomes clearer and clearer. And then she said that each of your siblings has a special aspect of your parent that lives through them. But my favorite thing, if you don't mind me reading this, was my dad wrote this email to a friend of his who lost their dad like a week before my dad passed. So this is my dad in his own words regarding death. He said, oh my, only God could script a story like that. In less than 24 hours, everything changed for you, but not for God. I learned after our house fire, the guide doesn't really want us to question him at all times, or at times like this, which seems odd, but rather he rejoices in how we respond to what he's giving us. And you, my friend, despite the aching heart of the loss of your favorite person on earth, are making God smile. In the next few days, just acknowledge with each breath you take the goodness of God, the gifts he gives, the timing of his provisions, and the eternal value of his son, Jesus. Your Father lives on in the generational legacy he's left you. There's been so many messages like this. I could read you the prologue to this daily devotional that he wrote. I could read you this. He did like this. He thought he was going down in a plane crash, and he wrote this like message on a bag.
That he wrote it to Mom, which was wild.
And there's like, I think there'll be a time and place we share those, but in the moment he would write things like that, and I always felt like it was way too over the top, way too grandiose. But now it's like timeless, and like, anyway, it's kind of fun to read stuff like that. But I do feel like I have a newfound appreciation for the role that faith can play in a life. And the other day, the stock market opened up. In the first 5 minutes, it dropped like 2%. But then in the next 5 minutes, went back to even. So there's like a net 0% loss. And I was like, man, if you're riding the second by second, if your perspective is second by second, that's a stressful place to be. You're riding the lows and you're riding the highs. But if you extend your timeline to the length of the day or the week, the month, the year, or eternity, it makes things less volatile. It's like you can zoom out, get the higher level picture, and see that the trend is up, and it's good. And so for me, having that timeline of eternity, yeah, it's given me hope. It's given me like coping. The verses are like comforting for sure, but it's also like made it a net positive, which I think is powerful. And just to clarify, I don't think that the primary use or purpose of my faith, at least, is to help me through hard times in life or phases of grief like we're in now. To me, that comes off as a little bit selfish. I think the primary purpose, as I see it, of faith is to have God be most glorified in me because I am the most satisfied in him. And with that, if that's the bullseye target, I think there's ripple effects. One of them being you have this long timeline, you have this everlasting hope, and you have a purpose. We could talk and do a whole episode on that, but faith has really meant something deeper and more powerful in my life in light of this situation. And to me, the beautiful thing about faith is that it really is just a choice. It's just a perspective that you choose to adopt these whimsical, magical aspects of life. And my two favorite hobbies are playing ping pong and reading. And in our men's group, we just finished reading a book by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce. And one of the characters in there is super academic and just says that, man, he just wishes there was proof of God, that there was proof of heaven. If there's evidence he would believe. And I don't want to sound naive, but I really have come to believe that the proof and the evidence is all around us. And you could look at the leaves falling in autumn and say, oh, well, the reason the leaves fall is the trees just need to conserve their energy. That's, true for sure. But you could also look at the leaves and just be struck by the awe and wonder of the colors, like the natural beauty of them all. And they can go hand in hand for sure. I believe that. But don't let the starkness, the black and whiteness of like, oh, that's just the leaves are falling because the trees are conserving energy, strip away the beauty of it. And that to me is like a parallel argument to faith, where it's like, I am adopting this perspective that there's more to life, that there is beauty to life, an added layer of colors and excitement. And that's why I'm looking at this death and choosing to believe that there is beauty and wonder and life despite that death. There's another book called The Short History of Nearly Everything, where it's this not Christian guy, but he goes through and talks to all these experts and scientists, and he talks about microbiology and like molecules, atoms, etc., and how at some point in science, you can't separate fact from fiction. And that to me is like, there's room for faith. The author even said that. The author got interviewed and was like, I'm not Christian, but I was astounded by how much room for faith there is in this world of science. So that's the exciting thing about me, not to go on a tangent, but I have gotten really excited about faith and how it can bring so much color and meaning, again, as a derivative effect. The other thing that I've learned, tying this back to couples, is I feel like in marriage, I've said this before, so forgive me. Shawn is both simultaneously the most loving, thoughtful, fun, and adventurous person that I know, right? But she's also forgetful, and she's sloppy, and she's emotional, and whatever.
Sloppy.
But it's like, which batch of those qualities am I going to believe? And I think as we remember the people that we loved and lost, Like my dad wasn't perfect. You said he was the most awesome person ever, which I think he was an amazing man. But he was not perfect. Like there's plenty of stories of us growing up as boys wreaking havoc. There's 5 kids in the house. So with that comes chaos. And so there was some hiccups, right? But that's not the batch of qualities I'm going to choose to remember. It's like, I'm going to remember the guy who allowed me to believe in whatever. He allowed me to dream. The guy was so selfless. In his voicemails, he opened everyone with, "Hey, Andrew, I want to let you know I love you and I'm proud of you." And it's like, this is the man who played incredibly with our kids, was so creative, had such an amazing imagination. And that's who I'm going to believe, right? That's the quality I'm going to believe. And I think that matters because that's going to affect how I parent my kids. And I think that it's the subtle shift in perspective that will leave a legacy generation through generation. You know that I've been into Ancestry.com since this happened. I zoomed out 12 generations all the way back to like 1600s. And it's kind of humbling to think like, oh man, someday I'm just going to be someone's great grandpa. And they're not going to really, I don't know who that guy was for me in like Thomas East in 1600. I don't know what he was, but I do know they laid the foundation for us to be here doing what we're doing now, how we're doing it. And that's the legacy. So anyway, one of the things my dad did well, my buddy Justin said this, that having the intentional deep conversations can sometimes be hard, difficult and awkward. But my dad did that and he was good at it. And he was definitely awkward sometimes, but he had intentional conversations. That's one of the things that I'm going to take moving forward. It's just doubling down on the meaning of things. So anyway, Dad, I love you. I miss you. I'm thankful for you. I'm so thankful. And even through this process, that's how I feel, is thankful, because I didn't know you as well as I do now. Hearing all the stories from your high school friends, college friends, I've written them a lot. I've written a lot of them down, which has been super fun. I can't wait to share those with our kids. But that's all I got. That's how I've been grieving. That's kind of the process, the background to my dad. I don't know how you guys go through this. I'm curious to see if this is par for the course. Maybe I'm being a crybaby. I'm not sure. We are less than 3 weeks out of this. But so the other reason I feel grateful is I'm honestly not sure which I would prefer, like both for myself, for my dad, for my mom. My dad died out of nowhere. He was healthy and then boom, had a heart attack, gone. Which is hard because it's definitely more shock. But also, you have people who suffer for years and they kind of deteriorate, right? It's like that is kind of easier for the loved ones around them because they see the end in sight and can do X, Y, and Z to like say what they want to say or do the bucket list things.
I know, but the heartache of seeing a loved one hurt takes a long toll on your heart.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like that's grievous too. So you have the two ways to go, like suddenly out of nowhere or years of suffering. That's why like you couldn't have written it up better. I feel like if I was going to come up with the way my dad would go out, this is how it would go. I'm not the one who writes that story.
I think he would have written it up this way too.
And I love in the funeral, it was said that God had done all he needed to do with my dad. My dad had done all he needed to do here on earth. So it was his time. And I was like, dang, that's freaking true. Like, it's not easy, but that's true. My dad sold the farm. They're like, he did everything. He put it out there, put it on the line.
He did.
And so I've been thinking like, even through the shock, I feel grateful because for my mom and for my dad. Like, I would not have wanted to see him suffer for a long time. So anyway, there's that. This is the journey. This is the adventure. We're on it together. And thank you for being such a helpful partner in this. Do I have tears and snot on my face right now?
Everywhere. I love you.
I love you too. Is that all you got? Any closing thoughts? Do I literally have snot on my face?
Yeah. Sing doxology and recite psalm.
I am thinking, I don't know. I want to do, I do have regrets. No, I do have regrets.
Let's just wipe this off.
I wanted to interview my mom and my dad in this freaking studio. My mom is shy, so she never wanted to do it. I think we'll be able to get her down though. And then I also wanted to do a birth vlog. My dad, if you didn't know, like us filming stuff is not like an Andrew original. My dad filmed everything we did growing up. Every Friday night game, he filmed my birth. So I wanted to have them do a birth vlog for us. I think we'll still cut that video up and have my mom be a part of it. But I don't know what we'll do. I don't want to like over memorialize my dad, if that makes sense. Or like, I don't know. I don't know how to do it right. So I'm just freaking.
You're doing a good job, baby.
I would encourage you to journal or reflect in a like. That's been meaningful to me and helpful to process emotions, put words to things. So, all right, we'll stop babbling. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. I'm Andrew.
I'm Shawn.
We're the East fam.